Hello, I'm Costas Isichos from Athens, Greece.
Hello, I'm Hendrik from Norway.
Bruce Gagnon from Brunswick, Maine.
This is Dateline News and Conversation. Got a very interesting show tonight. You notice the format is different. The four of us are back in the saddle after several months that we haven't been talking to each other this way. So I'm really very happy to have Costas, Hendrik, and Bruce back on the show again. Gentlemen, there's a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. The first topic I want to mention that I think is pretty serious, and I don't know that a lot of people understand how serious it is. It's this U.S. NATO war games. It's entitled Steadfast Defender 2024. Now, these war games have been going on Russia's borders for, I think, a couple of decades, all preparing an attack on Russia. This one is supposed to be the largest one since the end of the Cold War. 90,000 combined troops from the United States and NATO, and thousands of vehicles, hundreds of ships, hundreds of airplanes, fighter planes, and reconnaissance planes, basically going to be surrounding Russia. When I think of this, I always wonder what Vladimir Putin and his circle must be thinking when these exercises are going on and they know the exact purpose of these exercises. Costas, what are your thoughts on this Steadfast Defender 2024?
Well, I think as the United States so-called empires and its long decay is taking place, and by decay I mean the loss of world hegemony, both on the economic, geopolitical, and military scale, more of these very dangerous and opportunistic military exercises will take place. So we see an expansion of war, peripheral wars, not only in the Middle East, but you mentioned Russia. I was in China. I came back a couple of days ago. I was invited by the University of Beijing. I was told there that the encirclement of China is taking place also for the last years, with a couple of American bases in the Philippines, the very well-known installation of nuclear submarines in Australia, the upgrading of military in Japan, the friendlier relations between Mongolia and the United States and the European Union. So the encirclement of China is also taking place. The encirclement of Russia is a fact already, not only by NATO, but the European Union, which is a junior partner, which has lost a lot of space in both the economic and political and social importance it had in the past. So I think this is a very dangerous game. As we say in our countries, I think we're playing with fire. They're playing with fire, actually. So Russia, the Russian Federation, of course, will take its measures and its steps to bring in on its security around its borders. But, you know, the last inclusion of Finland in NATO with a yes of Turkey, which was Sweden. I'm sorry, I meant Sweden, not Finland. The encirclement is going even further to the north in Scandinavia. So we have from Scandinavia a vertical corridor from Scandinavia, the Baltic countries, Eastern Europe, the Balkan countries, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Black Sea. And this is really heightening up to a very dangerous prelude of a war. I am very straightforward to saying this, and I don't think it's not a game anymore. It's actually playing with fire. So everybody knows how difficult it is to contain accidents that could happen. Accidents, I mean military accidents in any case, and whether it's in the air, in the sea, or in the land. Or so these things are piling up more and more, and we're over the bridge of just a war exercise. This is really a military threat showing Russia that we're not afraid into going into a war with you. And of course, Russia will not accept this blackmail. It has never done it historically, whether in the past the Soviet Union and before that. So I think we're at a very dangerous step, which has been taken by the Washington and the NATO partners and the European partners in the last years and months. And I think we should have a rise up of Western societies in the European Union against this military strategy, which is putting everybody's neck on danger.
Yeah, Hendrik, over to you in Norway.
Yes, unfortunately, Jens Stoltenberg is coming from my country, the General Secretary. I don't know how he go to sleep each night because of all this propaganda shit he's telling all the time in the media. Not only in Norway but internationally now, unfortunately. In his early years as a student, he has demonstrated against NATO, and now he's secretary of NATO. So it's a crazy career. But as Costas say, it is, of course, a very dangerous situation. But at the same time, I think people in Europe start to wake up that this costs enormous amount of money, and it doesn't help. In Norway, in Sweden, we see now that people discussing and our governments are discussing what will happen if really Russia invades us. And they coming to the conclusion that NATO will not help us. US is too far away, and they have many other things to do. They will not come to help us. So I don't understand really why we're making these war games, these NATO games, bigger and bigger and bigger, if nobody believes anymore that this will work in the case of a war. On the other side, it's completely crazy to think that Russia will invade Scandinavia or another European country. Of course, if you want to discuss it, you can say, yeah, but he has invaded Ukraine. But as we know, it's a complete other history. That is, you cannot compare it with Sweden or I don't know which country, Poland or what else. So yeah, it's crazy, but I think people starting to waking up and see that this costs a lot of money and helps nothing, only provoke dangerous situations.
Okay, Bruce, you've been on top of this for a long time. The view from the United States.
Well, first, let me say these two guys spoke very well. I agree with everything they said. Their analysis is very sound. When I think of Washington and NATO and their allies throughout Europe, their minions, if you will, it's all they have. They have nothing else but military force and chaos. That's all they have. They have no moral authority. They have no legal standing. They have no support around the world. I'm talking about the global South. So these are all signs of complete and utter desperation. They're losing virtually on every front, and they will continue to lose. But their strategy is, if we can't keep control of this 500-year-old colonial project, we're going to make you suffer. We're going to make you suffer. And they hope that people will surrender and get on their knees and let them stay in control. But I think what Hendrik is saying just now is that people are starting to figure it out, even in Europe, the vassal continent, and that's a good sign. I was just this morning reading an article about the farmers' protests that are widening throughout Europe. And one farmer was saying, oh God, did we ever make a mistake and believe this whole Ukraine story. So that's a good sign. And let's just hope that catches on into a wildfire that spreads very quickly, because we need the people now to come alive more than ever.
The only thing I want to add to that is Vladimir Putin has made it very clear to Washington publicly, and I'm sure back channel, that we will strike back with everything we have and nobody will survive. And if Washington thinks that Russia is going to get on its knees or China going to get on its knees, this is the gravest strategic mistake that they could ever make. Bruce is talking about this is spreading, the opposition is spreading like wildfire. I want to transition to the next topic tonight. The Israeli genocide in Gaza and the ICJ ruling against Israel. This, I thought, was an enormous blow to Israel. And we've seen the solidarity of people around the world behind this particular judgment. I believe the reaction is what Bruce is talking about. People around the world now are waking up to this agenda that has all of humanity held in hostage. Costas from Athens, what are your thoughts on this ICJ ruling, and any thoughts you might have on the Israeli genocide on Palestine?
Well, on the 2nd of December to the 5th, there was an international conference in South Africa, in Johannesburg, which I attended. I was invited by a Palestinian organization with the support of the South African government and the great support of Mandu Mandela, Mandela's grandson, who is the president of the Association of Friendship between Palestine and South Africa. And in this international conference, it was convened with the representation of more than 60 countries that Israel would have to go to court for its criminal acts of war, genocide, displacement of population, the mass killing of civilian population, mostly children, elderly women, and so on, and disabled people and babies, even babies. So this has, Israel already has lost the propaganda war. It's not making any advances in the military field. I mean, try to remember what Gallant, the Minister of Defense of Israel, was saying in the first day. We are not dealing with human beings. We're dealing with something lesser than dogs. And he actually made a point in saying that tried to make a point saying that this would be only a few weeks. We're in the second month of this genocidal war, and it's not ending. I mean, you cannot end a guerrilla warfare in a 45 kilometer long and 18 kilometer wide strip, Gaza Strip, where everything is in rubble. There are hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, and the Israeli war machine cannot do anything. It's not doing anything except killing and displacing and killing innocent civilians. It's not a war. It's not a real war between soldiers. It's nothing to do with that. It's a complete mass genocide of civilian population and being displaced. So Israel has lost the mediatic war, the propaganda war, already all around the world. In my country, we've had hundreds and hundreds, and every day there are demonstrations in the center of Athens, in the north of Greece, with Palestinian flags. People going into Starbucks with Palestinian flags and raising their voices and shouting "Free Palestine, Free Palestine," and the Starbucks people are completely bewildered what is happening. The boycott against Israeli products is incredible. Israel is not just an ally of Greece. Israel is a very close ally, military and politically and diplomatically, of Greece, unfortunately, of the Greek government. Israel has its only military base in the southern tip of the Peloponnese in Kalamata, where it's training pilots in a pilot school. owned by the Israeli Air Force. We have a couple of Navy ships patrolling the area along with other NATO so-called allies of Israel. And we recently sent another battleship to the Red Sea against the Houthis. So this war is not just a genocidal war. This is a widening conflict which could involve, it is involving already Lebanon, it's involving Jordan, it's involving Syria, it could involve Iran, it could involve many other countries around the region. So this could be as Bruce said, a wildfire, but this time a military wildfire, including more and more countries and nations and peoples. So it's not just a cry in defense of the Palestinians, it's a cry for peace and a cry for international justice, as the United Nations General Assembly has already voted on the building and the existence of a Palestinian nation, which is not happening, and it will not happen because the Israeli fanatics in government don't want this. These are not politicians. These people are extremist, religious fanatics who have nothing to do with politics. You can agree and disagree with politicians from all over the geographical, from the left to the right, but you're not talking to politicians. You're talking to fanatics who think that the Old Testament is what we have to follow. So it's a very dangerous situation that militarily and diplomatically, Israel is in the corner, and I don't know what they're thinking about. I think that if their choice is to bring in more people into the conflict and more nations, then this will spread, and it will be a very, very dangerous situation.
Yeah. Hendrik.
As you know, I'm born and grown up in Germany in a very Christian family, so in a very Christian society. And as you know, Christians have always supported Israel very strong because it's a holy land and so on. But I think, as Bruce says to the other topic, people start to figure it out. So when I have contact with my family in Germany and so on, they changing their mind now. Now there is fully support for a solution in Palestine, I think, over the whole world. But the government in Germany is still on the Israeli side. And if you start a discussion about it, then you are anti-Semite, you are a Nazi, you are far right wing and whatever. There is no real discussion in Germany at all, in the government or in politics. So that's why I would like to ask you, Costa, one more time. Is there this support for Palestine? Is it only the people, or is it also the government? Because Germany, of course, has a different history when it comes to Israel.
No, Hendrik, it's not the government. The government, like in Germany, the Greek government today is in favor of Israel. They're supporting Israel in every way, militarily, economically, but rhetorically speaking, they always try to balance into a very vague equation talking about the rights of the Palestinians to have their own country. But that's where they stop. They just make a little mention of this. While at the same time, anybody who is in favor of the United Nations Assembly decision and international law for the foundation of a Palestinian country, and you're talking against the genocide of Israel, then you're, like you say, an anti-Semite, you're a Nazi, or you're a philo-Nazi, or whatever. I mean, there is no political correctness or incorrectness to tackle what you're saying. So I do agree with you that all over the European Union, I think the only exception that we have in the European Union, where there's a mass, over 80% of the population in favor of Palestine, and with a lot of talk within the parliament, is Ireland. In Ireland, you have Palestinian flags over city councils and cities and trade unions and over outside shops. So in Ireland, it's completely different. But in the rest of Europe, I do believe that there is a very dramatic change in favor of Palestine against the Israeli genocide. but the governments as a whole, as you say, in Germany, are on common ground.
Bruce.
Well, I think the ICJ hearing was really, really obviously important because for me, it really meant that the whole United Nations international Western controlled system of law and morality is on trial. I was surprised, to be honest with you, at their final determinations. I didn't think they'd go as far as they did, but I thought the European members of the court would take Israel's side. But I think it indicates that they knew they were on trial, and they had to make a showing because the system is decomposing right before our eyes on an international level. I think we all must applaud South Africa for their very courageous step and for their excellent interventions that they made during that trial. And so really, to me, it just again underscores how the global South is exposing the West using World Court and other mechanisms, the growing power of BRICS and the de-dollarization of the world, all key elements in that. Here in the U.S., the big joke in the last few days has been Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House. Out in front of her house, people are protesting every day, and she comes out and tells them to go back to China. And then she was on CNN being interviewed this past week, where she talked about anybody calling for a ceasefire is working for Vladimir Putin. And she was going to ask the FBI to investigate people calling for ceasefire, thinking that they're being paid by Vladimir Putin. So this is the outright, out of touch reality of the political class in the United States. So anyway, as we talk right now, there's rumors that there's a ceasefire deal in the works. Hamas has to make their determination whether they're going to accept it or not. They've always said that they would only accept it if it was a total ceasefire and if Israel pulled out of Gaza. I'm not sure Israel's willing to do that. So, but I think the pressure on Israel is enormous right now. Because of the global protests, because of the ICJ, even I think the Biden administration is catching so much hell now. I just read yesterday, I think you all know who Samantha Powers is. She's in charge of the, what is it called? Anyway, one of the
USAID, I think.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Well, anyway, she was speaking at, making one of her speeches, and she wrote a book on genocide in Africa some years ago, and two of her former staff interrupted her speech and called her a total hypocrite because she's not saying anything about the genocide in Gaza. So inside the United States, there's some serious rumblings going on. The Black community is now a group of pastors all over the country have created an organization to protest the U.S. role in this war on Gaza. So things are happening. And so I think that Biden is being forced to put pressure on Israel. And so we'll see what comes of it all. Keep our fingers crossed.
I think we're talking about the pressure. Costas mentioned boycotts, and this is one of the most powerful methods anybody can use. You just don't buy anything in your grocery store or anywhere that was made in Israel. And I've had a couple of shows with people who have been to Lebanon and Palestine, and they're talking about what they're hearing is that the Israeli economy is in free fall. It's been hurt very badly, not only because of the boycotts, but the amount of money this war is costing them, but the Houthis redirecting traffic from the Red Sea and the Suez Canal to go all the way around the Cape of Africa, another 19 or 20 days and thousands of dollars more for Israel to have to pay to get goods and supplies. So it is working. And as Bruce said, we can only hope that it continues to spread like an out of control wildfire. We're on the topic of blowback. One of the things that I keep reading, and I'm in Russia, and I'm reading this mostly from Russian media and some from the United States. Everybody pretty much agrees now that the sanctions on Russia have not worked. But the storylines from across Europe is that people there are experiencing extreme austerity, the loss of jobs, bankruptcies, the closure of companies. Supposedly, America is inviting these companies now to come to America and Mexico. I'd like to know from the two of you, and then we'll go to Bruce for his opinion, but the two of you that are part of the European Union, in your words, are the people really feeling this? Bruce had mentioned all the protests with the farmers and the tractors. So Costas, in your opinion, what do you think the general trend is regarding the backlash to these sanctions among the people?
Well, poverty is spreading across Europe. I mean, multi-dimensional poverty. It's not just, when we talk about poverty, usually we think someone who's living in the street, who cannot have 3 meals a day. I'm talking about multi-dimensional poverty. Poverty that has to do with energy, poverty that has to do with consumption, poverty that has to do with schools and education. Where the percentage that is being put as money is concerned into these public spaces, public sphere of education and health is diminishing rapidly. Europe has used the boomerang sanctions. They've come back to Europe. These sanctions against Russia did not work, and they haven't worked, and they're not going to work, simply because Russia has a very, very wide, number of associates and partners around the world, not in the global south, within the BRICS, Latin America, Africa, Asia. What about the European Union? Who is their partner? They're an old colonial and decay power, where they're being kicked out of their last strongholds in Africa, Central Africa and Western Africa. The old French Empire is just a joke. Great Britain, it's outside the European Union, and they only have one partner, which is the United States, and they're always bickering with the other European partners of minor things. They're always in agreement on military strategy, of course, but as far as economics is concerned, they have a lot of differences. So the European Union is in total decay. As we speak now, at this time, Brussels, the European Parliament in Brussels, is being surrounded by more than 1,000 tractors of farm workers. As we speak today, in Athens, in Rome, in Spain, in Germany, we had great demonstrations of farmers. Why are farmers going to the street? Because energy for them is just a luxury. They cannot do their work. They cannot plant. They cannot use their machinery. It costs them more to spend on energy rather what they would make in selling their crops and their products. So, European Union is in total decay, economic, socially, politically, morally. And it's not just a question of people in Europe, being in disagreement. They're angry. They're in the streets. They're struggling against the European Union's policy in almost every country in the European Union. And as more and more find out, the main reason is an unjust, undeclared war on Russia, on Ukrainian soil, where Europe has lost the economic war, the energy war against the Russian Federation. The more these people in the European Union will discover, more people within the European Union will discover that the problem is in Brussels and Washington. And the people have to take more and more responsibility in changing things and finding out that Russia is part of Europe. It has always been, not only geographically, but historically, politically. Russia belongs both to Europe and both to Asia. It's a Eurasian country. And you cannot just kick out and make disappear a country which has existed for thousands of years or hundreds of years, a matter. So it's a question of simple logic. And I'm bewildered that the European politicians are still sitting in their desks, dreaming in fantasy land, and not realizing that if they go out in the streets, they will have all these rotten crops put on them and thrown at them, whether it's eggs, tomatoes, lettuce, or whatever. The people are really angry about the European politicians being junior partners to a decaying empire.
Yeah, Costas, I appreciated what you said about multi-dimensional poverty. And another part of that poverty is food scarcity. No farmers, no food. I mean, the backlash from this is going to be enormous when people, now it's a matter of they can't afford everything they used to have to eat. Now it's going to be there won't be anything there to buy. Hendrik, your thoughts?
Yes, in Norway we are always in a little bit lucky situation, but we are feeling it now. We are losing jobs, houses, prices from houses go down, and that is very dangerous for the whole system in Norway, because everything is dependent that you own your own house and live there. So it's really a dangerous situation. And now Norwegians also feel it for the first time, really. The corona crisis or bank crisis in 2008, it was not so difficult for us. We have enough oil and gas, and there is enough money in our pockets. But now we feel it really, because we're losing jobs, and it's a really dangerous situation. Everybody is a little bit sitting there and don't know what will happen next year. Maybe I've given this example before. My sister is studying, and she lives in a small flat, and for electricity she has paid 30 euros or dollars. It's almost the same now. Now she has to pay 136 per month. It's unbelievable. And when I see the food prices in Germany and compare them to Norwegian prices, they're almost the same now. So it's really difficult, and I don't know how people in other European countries what they think about the future. I think they are afraid. A lot of them are afraid. When it comes to the farmers' protest, we don't have these kind of protests in Norway. Farmers are still good paid, I think. But in Germany, of course, there are a lot of protests from farmers. But the media and the government in Germany, like a sorcerer, has put out another history or a new history out of the hat, that now we have to demonstrate against far right-wing parties in Germany. So these farmer protests almost disappear out of the media after some days, and now everybody is demonstrating against right-wing parties. s- it's a completely crazy situation, but I think people will understand what is going on here, that this is all a campaign because these politicians and media know that they're only telling lies. They don't have anything to offer. It's a complete chaos. But I hope that more and more people wake up and will demonstrate and I don't know, as Costas say, write letters or throw with anything to the politicians. No, but it's a crazy and difficult situation, I think, for many peoples in Europe.
One of the things I've been following, Hendrik, in Germany is this, I don't know if I'll pronounce her name properly, Sarah Wagenknecht,
Yes.
who started a new party. She has been ranting against these people for the last number of years. I even sent her an email several years ago, which she answered. I was really surprised. So in my mind, she's kind of an all-star. I just can't, I can only hope that she continues to gain traction, that people will understand she's talking common sense. She's not some radical crazy person. This woman is well-grounded. Anyway,
that's completely right. But the media never discuss really points. They put her together with AfD, the Alternative for Germany, and say, "Oh, it's almost the same." They want to throw out the immigrants. So Sarah Wagenknecht is almost also a right-wing person, but she comes in a red dress, and that's why she looks like a socialist. So it's a media campaign against her, and they try to mix it together with the AfD in Germany, and it depends on the people, what they are doing.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be surprised to find out that nobody in the United States is feeling the pain from this backlash. Bruce, I mean, you people are all living a life of luxury, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Donald Trump is sending us all cash every month. I've been kind of surprised at how many EU politicians have gone to school in the United States, Harvard and Yale and other such places. And I often wonder if, while they were there, if they got recruited by the CIA. Because why else would the leader of a European country continue to support this ugly Washington agenda to the detriment of their own people, unless somehow you had been recruited early on and turned, in the wrong direction? I used to live in Orlando, Florida, and right across the street from my office at the time, I was working in the peace movement then too, was a Christian fundamentalist, very elite, wealthy school. And years later, when Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister of Germany, came to power, I learned that she had attended that school in Orlando, Florida years ago. And it made me wonder if I noticed that Musk is now planting chips in people's brains. And I wonder if maybe Annalena Baerbock and some of these other EU leaders had a chip stuck in their head. But anyway, a couple things that I think are interesting that I want to share. In Britain, Labour Party, the leader Starmer is in big trouble. The Muslim voters across Britain, the United Kingdom, are in revolt against Labour Party's horrible position on Gaza. They kicked several of their members out for speaking, in favor of ceasefire. And so now the Muslims are saying they're over it. They're not going to support Labor anymore in the next election. In fact, they're now creating organizations to run their own candidates in key districts where there are high percentages of Muslim voters. And so Starmer suddenly is trying to kind of, roll it back and re-ingratiate himself with the voters, but apparently it's not going to work. The other day in the United States, the United Auto Workers Union, one of the biggest unions in the country, endorsed Biden. But after announcing the endorsement for president for Biden, the leader of the group said, but I must honestly admit that the rank and file members are largely going to vote for Donald Trump. And so what the Democrats still, while they still have control over a lot of institutional elites, like, the head of unions and the head of churches, black churches, for example, what you're seeing is the rank and file, the base of these organizations across the country are revolting against this system because it is hurting the American people. All this war spending, $34 trillion in debt. People are not stupid. Our inflation is kicking our rear ends too in this country. And just this week, the United Postal Service delivery system, it's a national system, announced they were going to lay off 12,000 workers. So, things are starting to hit the wall globally, I think. And it's a bad sign for the elites, whether it's United States or in Europe.
You almost got us off track, and I'm going to just contain myself there, Bruce. You and I have talked about this and others. The number of these appointed people in the EU, the vast majority of them have been educated in the United States, and there is no doubt when that happens, somebody with money sponsored them. And in my mind, there's no doubt that when these types come to these Ivy League, East Coast, or Stanford University in California, they are all known by the CIA, and I am absolutely convinced that they're groomed. This would be a good topic for another day, but who are these people? They're the people that attend the Bilderberg Group. They're the people that attended Davos. They're the people that are part of Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum. It's not difficult to connect the dots.
You've been talking about your trips to Georgia, where that country is infiltrated with these kind of U.S. agents, if you will.
Yeah, not Georgia. I was not in Armenia.
Oh, Armenia. Sorry.
Yeah. And boy, it's on 2 trips there, and I'm in contact with some people in opposition parties, and they will all tell you that they've been infiltrated by the USAID, the CIA. There's a huge American university there that has been there for decades, which have been educating the younger people. And so this could be a good topic for another time that might take us maybe a whole show. This has been really interesting so far. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to talk about. I don't know how we could not talk about what's happening in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. The ICJ yesterday just ruled against Ukraine, who approached the court and wanted Russia blamed for the downing of the flight, what was it, MH17? Several years ago, they were blaming Russia, and the court ruled against that. Ukraine wanted Russia accused of funding terrorism in Donbass. And the court ruled that no, money is outside of our jurisdiction, but the fact that Russia has supplied the Donbass with military equipment and assistance is not within our purview. But the court went on to say Russia was not guilty of terrorism. What happened last week, I don't know whether it was a story in your parts of the world. It was certainly big here. The downing of that Russian cargo plane carrying, I forget how many Ukrainian POWs, I think 76, were shot
76, I
down.
think.
What's that?
76, I think.
76, plus a crew
Yeah.
and some escorts. I just read today that Russia has recovered all of the body and body parts, and because of DNA, we'll be able to determine just who they are. But Russia has come out and categorically stated that the United States of America is complicit in this because they have proof that that plane was shot down by United States Patriot missile batteries. 2 of them hit that plane. Now, when we put this into context with what's happening in Israel, what's been happening in Ukraine for all of this time, the surrounding and movement of military troops and bases around China, I'm sitting here wondering, what's it going to take for those crazies who are behind this? And there's no doubt in my mind that Ukraine was not acting on their own. The United States has been running that show for these past 10 years. I want your thoughts now on Ukraine, the latest happenings in Ukraine, and also part of this, and there's a lot to discuss, but there's a rift between Zelensky and his general, Zaluzhny. He threatened to fire him, and he said it was going to come at the end of the week. And so I just want to know how you look at this situation as it continues to boil and escalate. Costas.
Well, the strategy has failed in Ukraine. The military strategy has clearly failed. That renowned counteroffensive from last year, that everybody was expecting that, Ukrainian troops would be in Crimea, they would liberate the rest of this Donbass, as they called it, liberation, and so on, has completely failed. They didn't even get a few hundred meters from their older lines. So we have a military failure on the field. We have a political failure because Mr. Zelensky seems to have been becoming a scapegoat for the West. Some leaders of the West I think, are already thinking about who is going to replace this character because he's losing the war. He cannot win it. So it seems that the only strategy on the military level is to inflict as much as pain as possible, hurting civil population and civil targets, even on Russia. Belgorod has been bombed more than 20 times, which is right across the border, and it's a Russian city. They hit this plane, the Ilyushin 76 cargo plane, which was carrying the POWs, the Ukrainians. No one sound in their mind would believe that the Russians would hit their own crew on their own plane. I mean, this is completely crazy. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, even if you are a conspiracy theorist, you cannot even make a theory out of that. It's completely crazy. It doesn't have any logic within it. So I do believe that Zelensky is following a path of inflicting as much pain as possible on the civilian population in Russia, hitting any targets he can, because militarily he cannot inflict anything else. Zelensky, the leader of the military in Ukraine, seems to be worlds apart from this idea. He has given quite a few interviews stating within the lines that, there is no other way rather than to have a dialogue.
Bruce has to leave in about 5 minutes. Can I send it over to him for his final comments, and then I'll come back to you?
Of course.
Well, sorry I have to go, but we have our weekly Stop the War on Gaza protests in a few minutes here in my town. I need to go. But I just want to say that in the United States Congress, there's increasingly division over funding for Ukraine war. And now it appears that the US is telling the EU they have to pick up the slack And I hope that the EU will have the courage, the people of Europe will demand that their Western-controlled politicians have the courage to say no. Great to be with you guys. I really enjoy listening to Costas and Hendrik's words very much. So thank you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice
Thanks,
evening.
Bruce. Costas, back to you.
Well, I'll pick up where Bruce left us. Blinken was here a few days ago in Crete, and the Prime Minister's vacation home in Crete. Mr. Mitsotakis is a vacation home, and he received Mr. Blinken at an afternoon while he was going on his routine trips to Tel Aviv and neighboring countries, Cairo and Beirut and so on. And there is pressure. Greece has already given in, the Greek government, into sending arms to Ukraine. So the suicide mission is continuing in the European Union by the leadership, both in each country and in Brussels. Greece is sending to Ukraine almost 90% of its armaments, which are Soviet and Russian made, mostly anti-air defense systems, S-300s, Oska, Oxa, Tor M1, Tor M2, which are very, very dangerous because these are very effective weapons, which Greece always had for the last 20, 30 years on its islands across Turkey as defense missile projects. Now, this is going all to Ukraine. And just yesterday, Defense Minister Dendias was at the summit of defense ministers of the European Union, and he made two very dangerous remarks on discontinuation of the suicide project, as I call it. He said that Greece will be sending more armaments to Ukraine, and he offered the Larissa Strategic Center of NATO as the head of that will strategically overview the destruction of the Houthis in the Red Sea. So Greece has given in already to two major requests, which were asked given out as an order to the Prime Minister by Mr. Blinken. The Prime Minister, of course, said yes. And yesterday, Mr. Dendias at Brussels at the Defense Minister Summit of the European Union announced simply what the United States asked for Greece to do. As the United States Congress is diminishing its military budget towards Ukraine, they want to fill it in with the rest of the NATO allies. And Greece, always as a good pupil of NATO and its masters in Washington and Brussels, already has said yes. So this is a very, very dangerous situation, but it has to do with the first and second topic we talked about, the economic destruction of the European economy, the economic destruction and the social destruction of European societies, the multidimensional poverty, and more money being put into armaments for Ukraine and in favor of Israel. So this is this complete square now, which all the European people are inside, is coming in closer and closer, and everybody's going to asphyxiate here if we don't stop it as soon as we can, as soon as possible. So it's a very dangerous situation. I don't think the regime in Kiev has a lot of time left. They're running out of time. They're losing the war militarily, politically, socially. The decimation of Ukrainian society is incredible. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed as cannon fodder in this war. And how much and how long is Ukrainian society can put along with this? So I think Zelensky is counting days, months, I don't know, years, I would not say, but this has to end, and it has to end because peace and dialogue is a necessary tool to end this war right now, as soon as possible. The faster this war ends, the better for all people on all sides, Ukraine, Russia, and the European Union.
Costas, you mentioned something, and I just read something today about Greece handing over former Soviet military hardware.
Yes.
And the question was, whoa, what is this going to do to Greece and Russian relationships? And as you and I both know, Greece and Russia have had very close relationships, and especially close historically with where I am in Crimea. So what do you think? What do you think the Russian response is going to be to this?
Well, first of all, the Russian economic relations with Greece right now are almost non-existent since the sanctions started. It's almost non-existent. But politically speaking, historically speaking, morally speaking, the relationships between the people of Russia and the people of Greece are very strong. Crimea was always a bridge of friendship and understanding between Greece and Russia, because of the Greek minority living in Crimea and living very well, having its schools and its language and its minority rights fully respected by the Russian Federation and the Crimean government and their Crimean constitution. And Greece doesn't give, excuse my word, a shit about this. The Greek government doesn't give a shit about this. They're just putting all their money and all their coins on Washington, not caring about anything that has to do with, a 1,000-year-old historical bridge that has existed between these two peoples and these two countries. And I don't know what the Russian response is going to be, but there is going to be a Russian response, I am sure. And there has to be, because you cannot just stand by and see all this old Soviet, old Russian military equipment, which has been functioning very well. It has been maintained year by year and month by month. They're very, very, they're working perfectly. And this is going to go into the Zelensky suicidal war machine. And it's going to cost lives on both sides, mostly Ukrainian, of course. But Russia cannot just stand by this. It cannot, at least diplomatically, give a sign to the Greek government that they cannot continue on this road of destruction of bilateral relations, multiple bilateral relations. The Greek people are firmly against this.
Hendrik, we're talking about the situation in Ukraine getting more complicated every day. What are your thoughts?
You have given us a lot of topics in one package. We could talk about this for hours and hours.
Well, we will.
Yes, of course. No, let me say this. For us three, all this is not new. We was already sure about 10 years ago that Crimea is not suppressing rights from minorities or from Crimean Tatars. We was sure about that. The Donbas region is not a terrorist organization where terrorists coming and taking over power in Donetsk and Lugansk. We were sure about that MH17 was not shut down by the Russians. So all this is not new. And we know, or at least I'm very sure about that, the military, on the military scale, Russia will win this war. There is no doubt in the end. They have enough time, they have enough equipment, they have enough people, and they have the courage to do it. Ukraine or NATO or Europe or whatever you want, they don't have a chance. And the most important point is, I think, that the people in Europe understand this, because media is not telling this to the people. Media is hiding all this information. They will also not tell about this ICJ case now. So it is very important that the people get this information from other sources, not reading your own newspaper. You have to try to get some information directly or from other countries or where else. Of course, the Zelensky regime, if you want to say this, will collapse. And if I would be Zelensky, I would, as soon as possible, disappear and live in one of my villas in Italy or where
In the
else.
Caribbean, in the Caribbean, in
Yeah,
Panama,
maybe
Panama Papers region there.
far away. Yeah, that's right. And people always, or Norwegian media tells always that I'm a Putinist, I'm pro-Putin, I'm paid by Kremlin, and that's the same maybe with you, Costa, and the same with you, Regis, of course. And we have visited Russia very often. We have spoken to officials and so on. Okay, but I'm caring about the people who are living in Ukraine. These are, it's a tragedy what's happening with this country. And I hope that the people in Ukraine, when the war is over, that they never again believe these lies from European politicians, from the European Union, from NATO officials, or from the USA, that if you come to Europe, if you be a member of Europe, then you have a bright future. Everything was a lie, and the country is destroyed. And who will build it up again? The European Union will disappear. They have not enough money. They have their own problems in each and every country. Who will build up Ukraine again? So I hope that when this war stops, that the people in Ukraine never again believes anything from these lies from media or from all these NGOs, these American, European NGOs or European politicians, and that they find a way to stand between Russia and Europe as a bridge. That's my wish for the future. All these other things will, in some months, maybe we will not know that Zelensky was a president one time in Ukraine. I hope so.
Well, I want to thank all three of you. Bruce had to exit a little bit early. He's an organizer of sometimes several protests a week in the state of Maine. This one was in his town. And by the way, he's an example of what all of us have to do. We have to do something. We have to continue doing it. And if possible, we have to keep doing more of it. Because I think we're at a tipping point now, as all of you have pointed out, with the massive awakening that's happened around the world. And that people, as Hendrik said, are feeling uncomfortable about their future. I know Americans are. People all over the world are beginning to feel that everything that's happening is bothering them, is connected. And I want to thank the two of you, and thank, of course, Bruce for joining me. Now that we're back together, if we can keep you, Costas, at home in Greece, or at least when you travel to Beijing or you travel to Cape Town, you bring your computer and they have Wi-Fi. We can connect from there.
Okay. I will do my best. I will do it.